I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, our live Patreon Get Vokl. You had questions, we had answers. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this live episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and Alice is down here in the square. She doesn't get a descriptor today, so she just has to go without. But it's so good to be back with you guys. I'm glad. It looks like there's a lot more people here than there were last time. Last time, like 3 people could figure out how to do it, but we just could not. We collectively could not figure out how to get this to work. So I'm glad that more of you guys could make it this time and join us. Exactly. We were sequestered, as Jason said. It was a very tight-knit group. Well, look, like we said last time, the whole reason we're doing this is because we want to hear what you guys have to say. We're curious about your questions. Jessica and Sue are in the hot seat. To give them a second before, there's all that pressure to come up with something to say. We did get some questions by email. And so I do want to ask some of those for some of our friends, particularly in the UK and other places in Europe who could not join us. So I will throw one out from Martin. Martin from England sent us some questions. This is a good one. Okay. Alice, you can answer this one. One of the things I like most about your show is the way you set out the cases. Are there any similarities to the way you set out cases in court?
Oh, good question. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Yes. So absolutely. I think before any case, every case is presented differently, but the whole time you are a storyteller. So whatever is the most effective way to get your story across in a way that makes sense, is how you go about it. Oftentimes, that's what the timeline, kind of like what we do with the episodes, but not all the time. You can imagine a case that has lots of need for pre-existing knowledge. Then you want to say it's some big program fraud, like insurance fraud. Not everyone understands, who can get insurance and who doesn't get insurance, that sort of thing. So you may want to step outside of the timeline so that you're making sure everyone's on the same base before you then tell your story, because what you want to do in court, just like hopefully you guys have gotten from our podcast, is we don't want to tell you what we think is the conclusion. We want the stories to be so obvious that you're nodding along, and by the time we say it, you're thinking, absolutely, there is no other answer but that. And that's effective storytelling. That's effective in literature. It's effective in songwriting. It's effective, I think, in court and also in podcasting.
And sometimes people will say that, and we don't get this a lot, but every now and then we'll get somebody who'll say that we're biased in the way we told a story. And I would like to think that actually it's just you got to the conclusion that should be obvious to you after we lay the story out, and you just think we're being biased. We're not really being biased. We're just giving you the facts, and it adds up for you to get where we want you to get, or where we end up. I mean, it's impossible to tell a story without bias. It's impossible to be just, I think, personally, I think it is impossible to tell a story where you literally just lay out the facts. You could do that, but I think it'd be really boring. Obviously you don't want to do that in court. I think one thing, and I'm not criticizing anybody's podcast. I love all kinds of podcasts. I do think some podcasts, they kind of try and hide the ball from you for a while because they want to keep the story mysterious and weird and unusual. And so sometimes the timelines are really confusing because, they're sort of they're keeping something back until later because they know once they tell that part, a lot of it kind of falls apart. And so we kind of try and avoid doing that. But I do think, and we've said this a thousand times on the podcast, that the best story wins in court. And, that's what we do want to do. I mean, we want to tell a story but also give everybody the facts that they need to make their own decisions. So, Jessica, Sue, you guys have anything that you want to ask? Any burning thoughts you have? I'm putting all the pressure on you.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Don't be shy.
You go first. Okay, well, actually, I don't know how I got in the hot seat. It's my first Get Vokl. So, but
I love it, Sue. Way to go.
I'm on Zoom calls all day long. I can do WebEx. I can do lots of apps, but I've never been on Get Vokl before. And I was having a little trouble figuring it out. And I clicked on something, and here I am.
And here you are.
I will take this opportunity to say how much I enjoy your podcast, though. And now I've gotten my daughter hooked on it too. And the thing I think I like the most about it is that when you get to the end of the episode, I mean, you lay things out, you go through all the aspects of the story. And I like that because you fill in the blanks too, like Alice just alluded to. Not everybody understands. You want everyone to have a certain base of knowledge about whatever topic it is you're going to be discussing. So like when you're in court, so you make sure that you give that basic information to everyone. And you do that with us too. You'll stop to explain a little bit about something you just said. But what I really like the most is at the end, when you're going through all the possible scenarios of what it is that could have happened, you talk through all of the options or many of the options. Even a lot of podcasts, they just will talk about the one that they believe in, but you guys will go through different scenarios and talk them through logically and help us reach those conclusions on our own, like Brett said. And I walk away going, yeah, okay, I agree completely with the conclusion that they came to, and it all made sense to me. They weren't just trying to get me to believe what they think. They helped explain it so we could come to that conclusion on our own. So just want to say that I appreciate that. And I'm telling everyone I know about your podcast.
Well, thank you, Sue. Thank you. And, this sort of fits in with what we were just talking about. When you are in front, whoever you're in front of, juries, judges, whatever, it's kind of like the old writing saw, show, don't tell, and what exactly does that mean? And I think what it means is you want people to come to a conclusion on their own. If all you're doing is telling people what you think or what to believe, they're not going to do that. They're going to naturally reject that because most people are independent thinkers and they want to come to their own conclusions. So, we don't always agree. Alice not, and frankly, we don't always know. We've had several cases where we came to the end and we're like, I have no idea. And that happens every now and then. But I'm glad that's really what we aim for, Sue. And so I'm glad that's actually happening. Somebody had an interesting question in the chat room that I wanted to address. That was, after listening to you two and Maggie, I wondered if either of you have ever had doubts that you wrongfully convicted someone of a crime. That's a really interesting question. And I think, and Alicia asked what I'm drinking. I'm drinking a lime LaCroix. So, so this will not turn into the Maggie experience.
We learned.
I think it is arguably the case, and I don't know if this is true, and I'd be interested to know what Alice thinks, that if you're really being conscientious as a prosecutor, I actually think it's really hard to have a wrongful conviction. I think wrongful convictions come from shortcuts and taking chances. Now, I will tell you the closest that I've ever had in my experience, it wasn't one of my cases, but it was kind of. Several years ago, I was in a position where in times I would be asked whether or not I thought someone should be retried. And we had a case where someone had been tried and convicted of murder, and it was a husband and a wife situation. And the wife was found in her car, and the car was burned out. It was in the middle of the street. The car was burned out. She was dead. She was burned to death. There was no way to tell how she died, because it's kind of like in the Mary Morris case. The fire was so hot and so bad that the body was completely destroyed. You could not find a cause of death. And the fire marshals had said it was caused by gasoline. The fire had started because of gasoline, and that in their opinion, there was nothing about the car that could have caused that kind of gasoline leak that would have led to the fire. The husband was tried and convicted, and he was having an affair. There was all sorts of the motive stuff, right? All that stuff was there. And he was tried and was convicted. And then a judge subsequently released him on the basis that he did not think there was enough evidence to meet the standard. And so we had to decide whether to retry that case or not. And the police felt very strongly that he was the person who did it. And it was one of those situations where you have a motive. He doesn't have an alibi. There was an eyewitness who saw someone matching his description leaving the area, but it was very dark that night, so it was kind of hit or miss, right? Very violent crime, if it were a crime. Do you try that again or not? And we decided to try it again, and he was convicted again. So, but, that probably was the closest case that I've ever had. A case where there was a lot of evidence against the guy, but it wasn't, nobody was on camera. There was no video of him doing it. And those are the really hard cases. And even a case like Scott Peterson, I feel very confident Scott Peterson's guilty. But that's one where, you just have to reach that conclusion based on the evidence, but there's nothing ironclad about it. There's nothing that says he absolutely did it. And those are the really difficult cases where you're either going to take those cases to trial and allow a jury to make a decision, or there's just going to be a lot of murders that are never, you're basically, the only cases you'll try is where it's a slam dunk, right? Where you do have something where it's so obvious that really the person should just plead guilty.
And just so we get to everyone's questions, bye, Sue. Thank you. Someone grab that spot. Tegan asked, since you guys are prosecutors, do you guys ever worry about people you've tried coming after you? Hi, Annette. So that's obviously a real concern. You guys have probably heard of some of the true crime cases where prosecutors have been targeted or actually murdered, presumably based on the cases that they have tried. I have been told before by a jailhouse informant that our names are written on like the beds, the bunk beds in one of the jails. So they know our names. It's not hard to find our names. They're on whatever docket, and our emails and our work numbers are on there. So that's definitely, our faces are in court. Obviously, they see our faces because, especially as a criminal defendant, they have the right to be in court, and they're in court. They see you, and they get to know you. And especially if you're sitting through a multi-week trial, they get to know your face and your voice very well. They're going to be able to pick you out of a crowd. But and people are going to feel however they feel. But just because we are on a different side of the V from someone, meaning it's like United States versus someone, doesn't mean that you have to treat the defendant or anyone in court as anyone less than human. And so this leads into the second question. Have you ever met any of the convicted people after they served their time or punishment or been convicted? Yes, all the time. Actually, sentencing and conviction are usually separate events. You usually get convicted, say a jury comes back with a guilty verdict, and sentencing doesn't usually happen immediately. It usually happens after some amount of time has passed. So you're going to see someone who you have convicted of a crime. And I actually walked into the jail one time and didn't recognize a defendant. And she yelled out my name. She's like, "You put me in here." And the guards kind of like stood up, but then she laughed and she was like, "But you're funny." And, it's not always that lighthearted, but in this particular situation, she was definitely not one of those that I had any doubts. And I think she, to some extent, recognized, owned up to some of her guilt in court as well, even though she went to trial. But to that extent, I think she recognized that I wasn't just demeaning her as an it. She was still a human. She was still a mother, a daughter, a child, you know, in court for something, for breaking the law, and she needed to be there, but it didn't mean that I treated her inhumanely. And so sometimes that matters, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, we do walk a delicate line. I think about this when I'm at the grocery store often. What about you, Brett?
Well, I mean, it's kind of weird, especially with, well, number one, a lot of these people are repeat players. So you see them multiple times because you have multiple criminal interactions with them. But the other thing is most of them, particularly the ones who are really are criminals. I mean, they kind of get it. You know, it's like they don't have any problem with you. They're doing their thing. They're like a criminal, and they know they're a criminal, and they run criminal operations. And when they get caught, they fully expect you're going to prosecute them, and they just don't hold it against you. I mean, I've really never had a negative interaction with any of the folks that we're involved with. And I think respect is important. I mean, these people, they broke the law. They need to be punished, and the rule of law has to be upheld, but it doesn't mean you treat these people like they're animals or something. And police, it's really interesting. I feel like police officers do this a lot too, because police officers often deal with some of the worst of the worst, but they are really good, no matter what they think about these people, of being, if you've watched a lot of interrogations, you see this. The best interrogations, the police are they're having a conversation with them. They're not yelling at them. They're not being aggressive with them. They're just having a conversation. And that is the best way a lot of times to get to where you want to end up.
Okay, a lot of good questions coming in. I'm sorry if we end up skipping one of yours, just ask it again. Annette or Jessica.
Hi. I do. I have a couple of questions for you. And first, let me tell you, I just adore both of you. I love listening to you. And I think that you really break things down and make them very understandable. And you do come to different, conclusions and so forth or you provoke thought is what I'll say. So there's two questions that I have. Well, actually three. But the first one is I cannot get over the Abby and Libby case. And what are the chances girl like a psychotic, sadistic killer, and just enjoying the day in broad daylight and coming across that individual? I mean, it just makes me crazy, to tell you the truth. But my question is, do you think he planned on doing it where he did it, planned on killing them there? Because I know that you talked about Libby's shoe being found, and did they make a break for it to run across the creek and he caught up with them? Or did he just plan on, really murdering somebody that day?
So a couple things on that. Number one, as you said, what are the chances? It's one of those things, what are the chances? And that's why I think a lot of people think that there may have been some sort of setup, some sort of catfishing, some sort of grooming, some sort of internet conversation. And that's possible. But I always like to say, when we talked about Maura Murray, people say that too. What are the chances that she happened to come across somebody while she was hitchhiking that's a murderer? And you could have said that in Oregon in Washington in the 1970s too. What are the chances as a hitchhiker I'm going to come across somebody who's a murderer? And then Ted Bundy picks you up, right? And you're just incredibly unlucky. But those things do happen. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think the police know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question. If the vehicle was parked in the graveyard, in the cemetery, then I think there's a strong possibility that he actually was going to take them away. A case we're going to do sometime in the future is the Evansdale Murders. And in the Evansdale Murders, that's what happened. The girls were kidnapped. 2 girls were kidnapped. Very similar situation, really. 2 girls were kidnapped. They were taken away. Months later, their bodies were found many, many miles away. So that person had obviously taken them away, taken them somewhere, and then murdered them. If the car was at the old CPS building, then he planned on killing them there, because there's no way he could have gotten them from the park to that building. The police, in their last press conference, they talked about a vehicle there. It seems like they think he was there. That would indicate to me that he went to the park to kill someone, which, as we talked about, is very bold, because that means he went to that park in the middle of the day, on a day when there were a lot of people out, with the intention of murdering someone there. Like I said, I think the police know that, but it's impossible for us to know.
Yeah, Nat, thanks for listening to that. That case still grips me. A few things, and this is nothing new, but the more I've thought about it, even after we did the episodes, I do think there is a chance that they just ran into this terrible person without being catfished. And why I think that is, I do think this person is a hunter for victims. There's no way he could have crossed that bridge the way he did with such ease, not having crossed it several times before, knowing what it dead ended to. I think he's dreamed about this moment. I think he's played it in his mind over and over and over again. And I think that's why he was able to do it in such a short time frame. Look at that timeline again. This is one of the most tight timelines we have of almost any crime we've covered so far. But I don't know where he parked, and I think that factors into whether he wanted to take them away. I don't think he's ever killed before. I think that's how he's evaded all detection so far. I think he has no criminal record. I do think they have DNA. It hasn't hit any of the databases for state, federal, local. That's a big deal. Or these 23andMe, is that what it's called? Those databases as well. It's really rare not to hit one of those databases these days. And the fact that he doesn't hit makes me think that this is his first time. It won't be his only time, because he's been dreaming for a long time. I think he's a perfectionist. This took a lot of planning, a lot of skill to carry out, and he did a good job. But I'm not sure everything went as planned this first time. So I do think that it went perhaps faster than he wanted it to, because I think he got a lot of sick joy out of this, and he probably would have liked to draw it out longer than it actually took place in.
So a few.
I don't.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't think they were catfished either. I think I'm just saying, when I say, like, what are the chances? I'm like, how unlucky they were very unlucky that day, because he was out hunting, like you said. I believe that too. I believed it was just all of the things, a perfect storm came together, so to speak. And, but I don't think they were catfished. I think he was out there. I think he was hunting. I think if it weren't them, it would have been somebody else that day, so to speak. But this is my other question.
I think that's right.
So I know that you love Cheryl McCollum.
Right.
The woman who speaks about like crime scenes and so forth, and you have to look at the crime scene, and I really enjoyed listening to her. And I'm wondering if you listened to her when she talked to the true crime broads about Missy Beavers, and that so her take on it is that Missy Beavers was the target. And so I was just wondering if you would revisit that.
I'd be interested to hear what she thought. I'd be interested to hear her thoughts and why she thinks that. I don't feel like she was. I think it was essentially a random act of violence. But I would always be open. Number one, I'm always open to hear anything, but particularly from someone like her, because I have a lot of respect for her. Hopefully, I'd like to talk to her about this case as well, Delphi, because I know she was up there recently, and as she says, being able to see the crime scene up close and personal is really valuable. So she was very adamant about it, like Beavers was the target. There's no question in her mind. So it was fascinating to listen to, and I listened to your podcast as well about it. Like I said, I really respect both of you. Really break things down, and you had her as a guest, and it's just interesting. And that's a weird case. That's another one that's like, that one should have been solved. If I say should have been just because that's the kind of case that gets solved. Like there's nothing particularly special about that case, and you even have video of the person who did it. So the fact that it hasn't been solved makes it automatically kind of weird. And so I'm not exactly sure what that means. To me, the fact it hasn't been solved makes me think she wasn't the target, because if she were the target, I just don't understand how the police haven't solved it yet. But I'll take a listen to that. Always happy to look into that again. Do you want to say real quick, Christina asked, what is the most theatrical thing you've personally done during a trial? Prosecutors don't get to do theatrics, unfortunately. That's all defense
attorneys. It actually can get objected to.
Do that. Yeah, you definitely get objected. If you try and do anything, you would get objected to. Do you think he will kill again? Talking about Delphi? Yes.
I think he's laying low right now because he knows there's a lot of heat, which is another side benefit of you all putting attention on this case, is that the police continue to focus on it. And he hears his name, or his bridge guy out there. He knows that people are doing podcasts on it. People are looking. I think he's smart enough that he's not going to strike until he thinks the coast is clear. But I do think he wants to do it again.
And I just had one more question. Have either of you ever been personally affected by a horrendous crime or traumatic situation that happened in a crime that led you to?
Fortunately.
Okay.
I don't have a Nancy Grace story, if that's what you're asking. No, but I think there's maybe something just as I've said this before. I think maybe it was in our first episode, which is now a long time ago. But my family, I come from a family of immigrants, and I have family members who come from countries where there really isn't rule of law. The people who can break laws, and there's really no repercussions for them. And it's the weak who suffer from that sort of system. And I think I grew up with a really strong sense that I was lucky to grow up in a place where it doesn't really matter who you are. If you break the law, there are repercussions. And that's what drew me to this line of work, is really seeing other systems around the world where the breakdown of rule of law actually hurts the weakest of us. And so that's what drew me to it. But in terms of, I've been held up at gunpoint before, but nothing happened to me, so it wasn't horrendous.
Oh my God.
It was at Yale.
Oh my God.
I was about to say, that definitely happened to you.
You're kidding me.
No. And this,
are you kidding?
I will actually say, Tosh, I've been talking to you in the chat, but this goes to Tosh's question about what happens if people are intimidating you as a small stature woman. In that instance, I was who I am, which is small stature woman, and someone pulled a gun on me. It's very common in New Haven, and I just bowed up. It was probably really stupid. I was angry. I'd been studying all night. It was 1 a.m. I was so tired. I hadn't eaten dinner. I really wanted to get inside, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? I want to take a shower and eat." And I just slammed my door, and I was like, "Come at me, bro." And I think it scared him, and he walked away. By walked away, I mean, I ran a little bit too, but
wow.
Jessica, you've been so patient.
So I've been on both sides of the V, and currently on the front of it, and I have listened to all of your episodes, and so I've gained a little bit of insight into what my where I think you practice and how I think you practice. But without going into that, I'm more interested. The law geek in me kind of wants to know, do you guys consider yourselves progressive prosecutors? And if so, how does that affect you? Or if not, how does that affect your practice in the environment that you practice in?
To be totally honest, I think that's a new term for me. I'm not sure I totally understand it. I will say that throughout my career, with different changing environments and different things that are in vogue, I've never changed how I view my role in the law. And I think that goes back to what I mentioned, that my understanding of my role within the law is informed by my immigrant family, right? And so to this day, I hear from family members who have been sent to labor camps. And seeing that thing. And so when there's different things in vogue, and nothing new is under the sun, it's really important to be a reader of history, because it's helpful to recognize there are things that are brought to the forefront of each day and age, and they are important, but it's helpful to recognize that we, especially those on the front end of the V, should not be swayed by emotion. That's kind of goes to Brett's point that we as prosecutors are supposed to be the dramatic ones in court. There's a reason for it, right? The facts are supposed to speak. And I that's how I view my role, at least within the legal system. And that doesn't really change throughout time for me.
Yeah, I mean, I just try to be fair. I feel like, I think I try to apply the law fairly, and I try to be a good advocate for the government that I'm representing. And I really think that's all you can do. I think if you don't treat every person as an individual and deal with them as people, I mean, this goes back to the whole respect thing. Like everybody who's up there, they all have a story and they have a reason they're there. And, you are charged with upholding the laws that you did not pass, laws that you may or may not agree with. And I think all you can do is try to be fair. I mean, that may be an oversimplification, but I really think that's if you do that, then I think you will do a good job. And I think you'll do justice in sort of an overarching way, not just you'll get convictions or stiff sentences, but actually the right conclusion will be reached.
I think that's how everybody goes into it. And hopefully when you are in it for a number of years, that's how you're still in it. I found when I was on the other side that that was not always the case. And a lot of that was controlled by policy, particularly in a jurisdiction that I practiced. We were basically told they don't drop charges on the other side, the government. And I had cases of actual innocence. And I was told by superiors, don't produce evidence that you have that shows that they're actually innocent, because prosecutors on the other side will find a way to use it to their advantage, because they're not going to drop the charges on their own. We had a lot of pleading out. And so it was very difficult for me, probably one of the reasons why I'm on this side now, because I think I can effectuate change better. But that was morally a really hard pill to swallow, because there was nothing I could do. And yet I had video that my client didn't do what he was accused of doing, and couldn't present it in a way to get them to drop charges. So I guess the answer that you gave is the most honest answer, in that hopefully prosecutors are that way when they start and, throughout their career. But I think that there might be some policy issues that might also affect that a little bit too.
Yeah. And I'm glad you're in the fight too. And making a difference on the side of the V that you see. We need people. This actually goes to, I didn't write the answer in the chat because I thought it would be taken as a joke, but Lindsay said, what are your favorite types of cases to try? My favorite types of cases to try, honestly, are those with good attorneys. And that's not a joke, because I want it to be a fair fight. The worst cases to try are when I see the other side and I'm thinking, gosh, they are not getting good representation. The way the legal system is supposed to work, Jessica, as I'm sure you know, is vigorous advocacy on both sides, so that hopefully, iron sharpens iron, the truth comes out. And there have been times where I've dismissed counts, conceded arguments at the trial level, at the appellate level, when I'm like, that's not a very good argument. I don't think that's something we should push. Thankfully, I've never been in a position where I've had superiors order me to do something that I don't think the law supports. Maybe not everyone is that lucky, but I feel very lucky that that's the situation I've been in my career.
Yeah, I've often said that. In fact, I've used that line in interviews before when I switched sides to being a prosecutor. And I've said, part of wanting to be a prosecutor is being able to appreciate and yield your power when needed, and wield it with care, because you have so much control with whether it's charging, whether it's discovery, whether it's dropping charges after the fact, you just how you charge. I mean, there's so much that you can, effectuate yourself, and that if a person's power hungry, if a person is, a law and order prosecutor who thinks that, their way is the right way, instead of looking at a case as you should from both perspectives and looking at it how the defense is going to present it, then yeah, I think you end up in a situation like that. And I've often said, I don't think it's a fair fight. Personally, I support open discovery, and I don't think it's a fair fight if both sides don't have access to all the discovery. It's just not fair to the other side, because as a prosecutor, I hold all the cards essentially. And so if I'm also not disclosing discovery under the guise that I don't believe that it's Brady, or that it doesn't meet Rule 11 or whatever, then I just feel like it's not, I just don't feel it's fair. And so I would much rather go up against somebody for a true and honest fight. I hate to say that because it's somebody's life in their hands, but I get what you're saying. It's just not right. If I have a case that I believe in, that I'm bringing, I'm going to bring it, and otherwise I'm not. And so the other person, on the other hand, on the other side, I feel really bad when they have terrible representation, because I can't do anything about that. There's nothing I can do to mitigate what I'm doing to represent the government fully to help the other side, but it churns my stomach.
Strangest situation I've ever been. Sorry, tangent, and then we'll go back to y'all's questions. There was such a bad defense counsel one time. The judge actually looked to me and had me make both sides of the argument, which I did.
That's true. I have had to have witnesses get appointed counsel because they're so bad, or they're committing crimes in the middle of the trial.
Perjuring themselves.
Other than that, I've actually had them make threats. So we've had to recess and then find them counsel, and but I've never had to argue for them. I have had a very pro prosecution, when I was on the defense side, a very pro prosecution judge basically rule on every motion against me, every aspect of every motion against me, except for anything that was discovery related that was in camera. And at one point in time, the prosecutor, who was winning every motion, so it was really annoying, was like, can't you tell me why they're getting this discovery? And she's like, no, they're getting it. Just, that's all you need to know. And basically, if he had read, discovery letters or something to, I'm not going to give away too much, but if he had read a Rosser, he would know why I was asking for certain information. If he read the discovery letter, he would know, but he didn't. So, I got what I asked for. But it does churn my stomach to think about bad representation, and that's why you have a lot of these cases with wrongful convictions. That's why
I have no problem with open discovery, because my position is always like, I'm going to beat you, so like you can have all the discovery you want. Like, I'm not prosecuting you unless you're guilty, and if you're guilty, I have the evidence. So, I don't really understand. And discovery terrifies me too, because I'm always afraid I'm not going to give somebody something I'm going to get disbarred. So,
yeah. Okay, so I think people want to talk about Outlaw Pass. Is that right? We've had a few questions about Outlaw Pass. We can dive in. So,
I can talk about Outlaw Pass for another 5 weeks.
I just thought y'all would be, hey Tegan, would be bored of it because we had 5 episodes on it.
Well,
so what are the questions about the Outlaw Pass?
What's that? Oh, well, thank you for allowing me to ask my questions. I'll let somebody else take the spot. I didn't know exactly how this works, but thank you.
Annette.
All right.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Welcome, Tegan. You got the hot spot. You get to ask a question.
I don't know.
No pressure.
Anything.
That's right. You guys are like so tame. I can't believe how tame these questions are.
Yeah, they are. Like, I really think it would be a good idea to get someone who left you guys a 1-star review up in the box to really spice things up. I think that would be really interesting.
So what we just did, where I said that I had to argue the other side, Keegan,
away.
You could take a 1-star review and just argue it. We laugh too much. Music's too long. We're biased.
Talk too much.
We think everybody's innocent.
That was weird.
I think everybody's innocent. It's like, okay. Yeah, there you go. That's the same, that kind of thing. Well, okay, so I have other questions that people asked if you guys need a moment to compose yourselves.
And someone can grab this spot, even just to see your beautiful face.
Yeah. Somebody asked how we met and how long we've known each other. Yeah. We've known each other now for what, 4 years, I guess?
Maybe 5. Maybe 5.
Right?
Going on 5.
Maybe 5. So yeah, we've worked together in our last 2 jobs. So this job and the previous job. And basically I had this big project I was working on and I needed somebody who was awesome to help with it. And somebody sent me Alice, and she was awesome. And we've been friends ever since. And Alice, the great thing about Alice, it was this terrible thing. It took months. It was awful. Everybody hated it. And everybody was all like upset and angry and depressed all the time. But Alice is just this constant bubble of positivity, as you can see. And so she always brought this joy. It's like every time I'd be depressed walking down the hallway, and there's Alice come bouncing down the hall. It's like, oh, well, I can't be sad.
I've actually never heard that, Brett. But that project took like 22 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week for months. And that's how we got to know each other so well. So even though we've known each other for about 5 years, it's like we've known each other for 75 years.
I know. So we're really going to hate each other or really like each other coming out of that. So.
Hello, Elizabeth. Thanks for joining. Oh, Jason asked, are we going to Crime Con? I don't know. Do y'all want us to?
We tweeted about that. We're thinking about it. I'm only wondering if you guys are going to show up because I don't want to be like the people sitting there and there's like, 10,000 people at the True Crime Garage table and there's like nobody at ours and we're just sad. So
I have a question.
Sure thing, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Dyatlov. I kind of put it in the message section, but it was a long time ago. So I'm feeling like the big key is, why did they leave the tent? And then my thought is, the one, I can't remember which one it was. I don't remember who was really dressed appropriately, pretty much for the elements, the guy with the camera, right? Yeah. So I'm thinking practically, wouldn't he have been somewhat able to go back to the tent and maybe bring some supplies back for the rest of them, which maybe he wouldn't have frozen to death? I could understand why all of the other ones wouldn't have been able to make it back without freezing to death. But I mean, that's all I've got. I was just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the problem, right? Like, it has to have been something that happened so quickly and was so imminently dangerous that you would leave the tent behind without getting anything, right? Which is why I don't think you can ever rule out the fact that somebody showed up and forced them out of that tent, because that's what makes the most sense there. Because really, if you had the slab avalanche, if that happened, then it happens and then it stops. And they need to get away from the tent because maybe they're afraid of another avalanche. They need to get their friends out. But that doesn't mean they can't collect stuff that's in the tent. They can't take 30 seconds to do that. The Katabatic Winds is a little bit better because there's an urgency there. Like, we got to get the tent down before it gets blown away. But even then, you would imagine somebody would be grabbing stuff and pulling it out of the tent while the rest of them are trying to get it down. The bombs, if it were a bombing, if Zolotaryov's outside and he sees that, you could imagine him being really, like, we got to go now, like, get out, run, right? That kind of situation. But yeah, if you could figure out why they left the tent, I think most everything falls into place. There's still a little bit of weirdness, and we talked about that, about exactly how they got wounds. But if you knew that, you probably could figure that out. But it has to be something so urgent that they have to leave immediately, but not so urgent, as we talked about before, that they don't walk down this mile-long mountain in a straight line at a relatively steady pace, which is why I think, as much as I would love for it to be a radioactive Yeti, if a radioactive Yeti's coming after you, you're just all running in every direction, right? It's that old saying, I don't have to be faster than the bear, I just have to be faster than you, right? So we did our best we could in the episodes we had, but there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down.
I guess I'm surprised that they were able to survive a mile hike down, and then be able to build a fire. So they must have been like extremely tough. I just can't imagine walking in the snow without in just regular snow conditions, even if it's not below freezing. And so, yeah, it's fascinating. So thank you for answering the question.
Great question. I'm sorry we don't have answers to it.
Yeah, sorry. Tegan, did you come up with something?
It's okay. You don't have to. No, not to put you on the spot.
You don't have to. If you just want to hang out in the box, that's fine. That's fine. Just, I don't know what these V things are, but thank you, Jason.
I feel like and to me, it was obvious that it was something with the government. I mean, probably not, but wait, no. I think it was obvious that it was something like, I think it's some kind of hit from the government or the KGB, something like that.
Well, I mean, look, the great thing about this case, right? I mean, you can make an argument for all this stuff. So the KGB stuff, you got all the weirdness with Alexander and his weird machine he's got, and then all these people who are these sort of high-ranking people in the government and their radioactive clothes, and Zolotarov, like, why is he even there? I mean, all that stuff. So I don't think you can rule that out.
I think there was definitely foul play. It's just so hard to know because we have the ultimate unreliable narrator in this case. Welcome, Diana.
Hey.
Hi, Diana.
Good. How
are you?
I just think it was like an interesting point that I forget because I binged them all at one time, that someone had said that like maybe the tent that was slit was like the supply tent and they were actually down by the fire. I don't know. It's all just very crazy. And then I think,
and that's from 1079, the book 1079.
Yes, and then I'm like, maybe the theory that there was like the bombs that happened was, I don't know. And I forget.
Yeah, we got an email today from somebody who obviously didn't listen to our podcast, but just saw that we were doing it. And they were like, y'all should check out this book called 1079. And it tells you exactly what happened. And it's all this. This is what happened. And I was like, hey, yeah, I'm familiar with that. Look, I mean, Alice really hated it.
I got a little offended, but
I thought it was great.
A lot of things about this case offended me in the sense that I couldn't make sense of it, and it was so deeply unsatisfying.
And maybe I'm just like super gullible.
Well, yeah, and the problem is
every theory you guys gave,
you're not gullible.
Like, okay, that makes. I mean, except for the avalanche one, but I was like, okay, like that makes sense. Like that could happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, the theory that the tent theory is kind of like the avalanche theory, right? So, like the people who came up with that theory basically said, if all of these things happened, that would explain everything that happened, right? If all these different things were happening that we don't have any proof for, then that's what happened. And I feel like that's what the avalanche theory is like. Look, we don't have any proof there was an avalanche, none. But if an avalanche happened, and this is how it could have happened, there you go. And I think the tent theory is kind of the same way, where it's like, if this is what happened, then it would explain a lot. The problem I had with that theory and with that book was there was just nothing. There wasn't even a good sort of weird circumstantial thing that happened that made you think, oh, I could see that. It was like they just sort of laid out this theory, but there was nothing to back it up. And I just needed something. I mean, any piece of evidence that those people staged that scene would have been enough for me to be like, this is a viable theory, but they didn't provide anything.
And, I found it so interesting. I didn't realize that so many people would be offended that we would even do the Outlaw Pass because they bought into the fact that this case was solved because it was an avalanche. I mean, we saw so many people comment like, oh, I'm skipping these episodes because what is there to talk about? It was an avalanche. And it was such an interesting commentary on a lot of things about today and what we think is true and who we trust to be true, to be telling us the truth, right? So even if you think something is true, I would think that you would want to still do your own primary research, or at least know the facts so that you can reach the same conclusion as opposed to being told what the conclusion is. Right. And that's what, we've said this earlier, but that's really why we do our podcast is we for the most part know what we think the facts are leading, but we don't want to tell you that. I don't think that's interesting for you. We think all our listeners are incredibly intelligent, more intelligent than us. They don't need to be told something. They just need to be given the tools. And I think you'll reach, a conclusion on your own. And I think that's more satisfying as a listener. I like those types of podcasts and books myself. And so I was personally surprised that so many people skipped our Outlaw Pass episode. So maybe tell them not to skip it.
No, they were so interesting.
That's exactly what we were trying to do. That's why, obviously I didn't believe the avalanche theory, right? The guy left any doubt about that. And I didn't believe it when we started, but that's why we started off laying out the avalanche theory and exactly what it was, so that as we're just going through the facts of everything, people can be making their own decisions about whether or not they think this avalanche theory is going to hold up or not. And then when we got to the end, we went back to it and explained why we didn't think the avalanche theory held water. And I have a feeling that most people were shaking their heads. Yeah, that's right. They were nodding along with us because they had thought the same thing. They had seen the same holes that we saw. So
it was super. I had never actually heard of that case before. And so when you guys released them all, I binged them all, and I never believed the avalanche theory. Like I heard the first couple episodes where you guys were going over it, and I was like, okay, wait for it. And then once I heard all the rest, I'm like, no, that's not what happened. I don't know what happened, but I don't think that's what happened. But anyways, thank you.
I'm just going to throw this out there. There's like about 8 minutes left.
I'm gonna hang up so that someone else
ask more questions. Yes. Oh, no, that's okay, Diana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. And obviously, if we go a little over, it's not the end of the world. But
we totally can. But I definitely didn't bring my charger, so my computer will die at some point. That was a selfish comment on my part.
A lot of people talking about Aisha Degree. Very happy that True Crime Garage covered that case. Hope you guys check that out. That was great.
I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but as we said in our 5-hour conversation with the captain, I really think Aisha's case can be solved. Share that picture. If you guys do nothing else, just share that picture of that girl that's been unidentified this whole time. And if we can figure out who she is, I think there will be a lot more answers.
With the Aisha Degree case, that's like really close to where I live. And I don't know, I always think, because I don't think she was groomed like via the internet or in person, but I've always wondered about pen pals. I don't know. And like, you would like, if you were like did you guys talk about it in your podcast? I don't really know. Did you?
We talked about pen pals briefly.
So someone asked, who could she have been a pen pal? I think that's possible. The more I think about it, I think that Aisha was a smart, mature 9-year-old. We've talked about this. She was a latchkey kid. She walked home with her brother. They let themselves in. She knew to lock the door when she left. She is a mature and responsible 9-year-old, still a 9-year-old, but mature. And I think it was something more than just a pen pal for her to do something that she knew would have caused alarm for her family. That's why I'm kind of stuck on this theory that she got this picture from someone who told her something along the lines of, this is your sister. Don't tell your sister. Don't tell your parents because they'll be really sad since they kept you but not her. Something along those lines that was so desperate, that had an emotional tug for her. I think she knew not to talk to strangers. I think she knew you shouldn't just leave your house in the middle of the night, based on the rest of her life.
I don't feel like 9-year-olds keep
it's possible to go
very well too, so it had to be something big.
Yeah.
Now, if it's true that she had planned to run away for 3 days or however long she'd planned it, which is what the FBI thinks, then she obviously could keep a secret. But
pen pal one would be like a pretty secret big about something like a friend or something not like major that
I think that there was some story wrapped up in that long lost sister thing that she was gonna bring healing or closure or something good to her family, and she wasn't going to be gone for long. I don't think she was trying to inflict emotional pain on her family. I don't think that was the intention.
Hi, Sharon.
It's good to see y'all's faces and put voices with faces now. I have a question sort of about behind the scenes stuff, and I mentioned this in the chat. I'm sort of curious what your relationships are with some of the other true crime podcasters. Like, do you have regular relationships that you reach out with them now and then? Is there a convention we don't know about?
So we have been so lucky because when we were new kids on the block a year ago, less than a year ago, we were nobody. Nobody knew who we were. People were dogging us. Like, why would anyone want to hear your podcast? And a few people did reach out to us in the beginning, and they've become great podcast friends. You know, Tim and Lance, Maggie Freeling. We do talk to them pretty regularly, and they've had us on their shows. And
they're just Missy Murray. Well, which is now missing.
Yeah. Oh, great. I'm so glad. That was so wonderful of Tim and Lance. We call them our podfathers. And they really are. They were so kind to, you know, have us on their show when we were really nobodies. And we just enjoy talking with them and still do. You know, Brett obviously is in love with the captain.
The bromance. I can't.
I don't know that the captain's in love with Brett, but
one day he will see the truth. I mean, I'll say this: we've had no negative interactions with anybody.
Which is amazing, actually. Amazing, because the true crime podcast world. I mean, there are some partnerships that are strong, but then there are others that kind of clash a lot. So I think it's kind of amazing that y'all burst on the scene like you did, and then you've had these connections with these other podcasters. That's what I just think is interesting.
Well, I mean, the great, you know, Maggie, Tim and Lance, James Renner, Aaron Larkin, were just all, when we did the Maura Murray case, I mean, they were just all super supportive and have been supportive from that point forward. And Tim and Lance, I really like them a lot. I mean, the fact of the matter is it really seems like they really care about the cases and about the victims. And I really, look, I'm not being negative towards any podcasters because we just haven't had any negative interactions. But the people that we have been connected to seem like, you know, I'm sure they're in it for the same reason we are. This is fun. We enjoy doing this. We like talking about these cases. But we also are really interested in, to the extent we can, bring closure in these cases where there are mysteries, and that's what I see. You know, Tim and Lance and everything they do, it is so clear they really care about these cases. When we mentioned Aisha Degree to Tim and Lance, they didn't know who that was, but they were like, "Hey, come on the show and talk about it." Same thing with True Crime Garage. They had not heard about that case when we talked about it on Maggie's Get Vokl, and the captain was all over it, and they did it this week. Maggie obviously really cares about the stuff that she talks about in the cases she talks about. So that's been the tie that's bound us to the people that we've gotten to know, is they really care about the cases and they care about the people involved. And so, I mean, if you care about the people involved, I don't know why you would be fighting, because you're all kind of working in the same direction.
This sort of keys off of that. And that's one question that I have developed what some of my friends would say is an unhealthy obsession with true crime podcasts. I literally probably for about 4 years now, I have just listened to podcasts because I got so angry listening to the news on the way to work in the morning. And so I strictly read my news, and especially in this last political cycle, which was just insane. And so some of them are like, you know, so is this an unhealthy obsession? Because I always have a story for when they talk about, like when so-and-so disappeared, or, oh, I would be careful with that, you know. I'm just sort of curious how, I mean, I don't think it's an unhealthy obsession because I'm just fascinated with mysteries. I'm fascinated with how people work and how they interact with others, and if they don't play nice and why they. So I'm sort of curious on y'all's thoughts about the true crime obsession, which has really exploded on the scene like in the last probably since Serial in like, what was that, 2014 or something.
You might be talking to the wrong people, because I think we became so obsessed that we made it our careers. No, Sharon, I think you really put your finger on something. You're not the only one, right? The reason that true crime exploded as a genre is because I think it hit something really deeply to every one of our cores. We all try to make sense of the world around us at all times, right? That's why we as human beings crave order. We crave rational explanations for the world. And when something happens that we don't think should, right? Something that seems unjust. Why are Abby and Libby, these young girls who went for a walk, now dead? That should not happen. We should not have 13 and 14-year-olds afraid to go on a nature hike. We should not get in our cars and be afraid someone's going to tail us and then burn the car down and we're going to be in it. And so I think at core, we are all looking to make sense of the world, and true crime, or crimes in general, turn our worlds upside down, and we are seeking answers. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's how we are wired. And I think it's also helpful as human beings to look through the lens of someone else's case, because sometimes it's too personal and it's really difficult to deal with the world turning upside down when it's directly yourself. And so I think there's a lot of processing of how we view the world. I see this in my toddler all the time. Speaking in the third person helps him process actually a lot of what he's learning about the world around him. So in a lot of ways, I think true crime is reflecting a lot of what's in us. And I don't think it's negative or bad at all. I think it's making sense of a chaotic world.
And I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll try and keep it short. I always have to rein myself in. Alice has to deal with this all the time on the podcast. But the first thing I would say is life is really difficult these days, and the world sucks in so many ways, and finding community is so hard these days. I don't care what it is. If it makes you happy and you enjoy it, you should do it. I mean, if what you like to do is play video games all day and that brings you joy, then play video games all day. If what you like to do is listen to true crime podcasts and that brings you joy, and being part of the true crime community is a community for you, and you meet people and you get to know things and you learn things. I just don't think there's any negative to it whatsoever. And I also think true crime is very human. People love mysteries, have always loved mysteries. Since the beginning of time, people love mysteries. Now we have this obsession with sort of reality, right? Reality television or whatever. True crime's kind of a combination of those. You got the reality aspect and the mystery aspect, and you've got something that you don't have anywhere else, your own personal involvement and the contribution that you can make, and the sense of community that comes when you join together with other people to try and do something positive. So I know there's a lot of people who like to get on their moral high horse and talk negatively about true crime. But
I'm not that person.
I do not ascribe
either.
to their.
I mean, obviously.
Yeah. I don't know that anybody on here tonight is.
Well, this has been really interesting. Thank y'all for taking the time and doing this.
Thank you for taking the
time.
Thank you so much.
All of you.
It was good with y'all. Bye.
Bye, Sharon.
Bye-bye.
And sorry.
So we got a few more minutes
because I'm at 17% now. It's my fault. I didn't plug in. I wasn't planning out of 5 hours.
That's the thing about, working in the closet. You gotta do what you can.
Any last burning questions, y'all? Yeah. This will not be our last Get Vokl, and it seems like we have fixed the previous technological issue of not being able to let everyone in. So any other questions? I know we haven't answered all of the ones in the chat. If you want to copy and paste it again, what's our next case?
You gotta wait to find that
what's
out,
the fun in that?
I don't know. I guess we could tell you guys, since y'all are special. We are doing Temujin Kinsu, which is a case that Maggie Freeland covered, and we are doing a deep dive into the trial and going through the evidence and whether or not he is wrongfully convicted or not.
So whether he's part of a secret ninja society, just to spark your interest.
And he could also be part of a secret ninja society of radioactive Yetis.
If you guys weren't lawyers, what do you think you guys would be? Brett, I bet you'd work at like Dick's.
Oh, good question, Tegan. That was deep. I wasn't
It was not that
like
deep.
prepared for that. I think I would be doing something in theater, to be totally honest. I always loved theater. I did theater for most of my life, and I think there's a lot of overlap. Theater is just as intellectually stimulating for me. And I think you also are able to reach people in ways that are deeply meaningful, and you can tell stories that are powerful. Stories change the world. It's just a different medium of telling a story for me.
And this will probably come as a surprise to no one. I was in communications for a while, and I really enjoyed that. So I probably would have ended up being in communications one way or the other. Yeah, podcaster. There you
go. Yes, Shannon. Trial lawyers are drama kids who like to do research.
Yes, totally true. Yeah, DJ.
Oh, that'd be gosh. Awesome. Oh, I do love music. Yeah. Okay, last question. If anyone wants to show their face, that's
before Alice.
I know. I'm so sorry.
Nope. Can't say we have.
I have not come across an obviously corrupt judge, which is, I'm really happy about that. I've come across hostile judges, but I don't think hostile equals corrupt. So I've been yelled at all the time in court, all the time. It's like it's a hobby of mine to be yelled at in court. Guys, this has been so fun for us. Thank you for spending your nights or maybe early mornings with us. We will do this again for you. Pop us a question in email or, all the social medias. We love hearing from you. I hope you know that. We do this for you guys because this is literally after work for us in a closet. But we really do it for you guys, not the 1-starers.
Exactly. We love answering your questions and we try to respond when you guys email us and stuff. So hopefully we've been good about that. I'll say this a lot of times, and I got to stop doing this because somebody will ask a really good question. And I'm like, oh, I need to save that one for later. And then like a month will pass. I'm like, I never answered that question. So if I didn't answer your question, if we have not responded to you, it's probably because your question is
probably
so good
starred on our inbox.
I was like, oh, I need to think about
we read
that.
Drafts
yeah,
of
it probably is. Yeah. But okay, guys, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. We look forward to doing this again. But until then, I'm Brett,
Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
You're not going to sing for us? Oh, God.
Wow, wow, wow.